Hi. So I just want to let the audience know real quick. On social media, I told you all I was going to play records for you tonight, and YouTube apparently won't let us. So I'm not going to play any music for you tonight, sadly. But we're going to have a great conversation, and I'm super excited to be here with Crissy.
Yay. How are you doing? I mean, you're kind of on a whirlwind book tour. I feel like every day I see you on a new Zoom screen.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think I'm shocked that we're still on Zoom. And I wish I could see the people that I'm talking to right now, but I'm happy to be here with you. And there's kind of cool things like this, like the fact that we can connect across the country, that's really nice. So yeah.
Well, obviously I love this book. I read it. I think I got it, maybe it was like last year, and I blurbed it. I love this book so much. I wanted to see, did you want to start with a reading before we jump into things, or how are you feeling about that?
Sure, either way. I mean, I could start with a little bit, or we could just jump in. If you wanted me to start with a bit, do you want? I planned out a reading with a record, but I think that since we're not doing music, we won't do that part. But I can read a bit from the beginning or the middle, or just jump into a conversation.
Why don't you read a little bit, because I have a million questions, and I just think everyone out there probably wants to hear how beautiful your prose is. So
thank you.
Let's hear it.
Okay, I'll just read a couple paragraphs from the beginning. So the book begins in August of 2005. They came by way of the Blue Ridge, crossed the first state line at Kingsport, and tracked the whole of Tennessee. Memphis at night in the rain, the Mississippi charging angry under them. Past the bluffs were floodplains, Arkansas, and then nothing but Texas. They came by way of the Stay-In Motel, Crystal, Taco John's, and Dixie Cafe. Burger wrappers shifting under their feet, receipts on the floorboard like a poem of their journey. Aquafina, Butterfinger, medium coffee. They came by way of brown grass and thirsty names, Sulphur Springs, Mineral Wells, Sweetwater, Big Spring. They came for their schooling, for his past, her getaway. When they reached the border, it was late August, evening and still hot outside, but the sunlight was thinning. It fell through their car windows in long slashes that illuminated the dust on the dashboard, the cracked windshield, and expired inspection sticker. Details that the police would eventually note in their report after finding the Honda abandoned in the Candy Club parking lot. But that was still 4 months away. On this August day, the evidence suggested only that Alana and Alex were too poor to fix the windshield and too distracted to keep the inspection up to date. Behind them, a slope of treeless mountains hunched in shadow, and before them, past the squat concrete bunker of the Paso del Norte border station and the brown gulch of the Rio Grande, Juarez rippled in headlights and neon signs.
Well, I wanted to start actually with, since we just heard that amazing beginning, I was reading your glowing New York Times review, and I just thought I would share with everyone, in case you haven't been compelled already to buy this amazing book. I loved the little last section of it, so I just wanted to read it really quickly. This is from Mesha's New York Times glowing review. It says, ultimately, Perpetual West is a meditation on a place where the prospect of disappearance and death is a constant fear. The novel is a rebuke to those, especially from the United States, who would romanticize these dangers or see in the border culture primarily a means of self-discovery. In this respect, Perpetual West is a forceful addition to the literature of the US-Mexican border and its ongoing history of tragedy and joy. And I love that, because obviously it's great, but this idea of tragedy and joy, I think for me, when I read the book the first time, that was really it. Like, there's so much love in the book, and people in love and falling in love and out of love, right? And people trying to figure out who they are. But then there's also like a lot of tragedy too, of just like being American, trying to figure out what that even means. And I think for me, that tragedy and joy is like so perfectly rendered in your sense of place, which, I mean, even in Sugar Run, your debut novel, like your sense of place, I will read any book you write just for this like feeling that you're able to sort of bring to these books. And so I'm curious about the setting and place of Perpetual West, because it's, you know, I mean, I think you can speak to this and explain it a little better than I can, but it's lovely. And I just want to know more about specifically why you chose this and how this setting and place came to be for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you like so much for, I also loved that part of that review and everything that you said. Yeah, so I think that, I mean, there's a few reasons as to kind of how Perpetual West came about and why it is set where it is. And the first is a very kind of autobiographical reason, in that I took a Greyhound bus from Asheville, actually, to El Paso in 2004. And I was going out there. I'd fallen in love with a woman who was doing a study abroad program, and she was living in Ciudad Juarez and taking classes both there at the National Autonomous University and also at the university in El Paso. And I was moving out there just to be near her. And I took a very long Greyhound bus ride out there. And I didn't know very much about the border and that specific area of the border. I knew, you know, very little, but I learned a lot while I was there. And I also found all these really interesting parallels to West Virginia in a way that was really unexpected for me, because I thought, like, here I am going to, you know, it was a totally new place. And on a certain level, it looks very, very different than West Virginia, and it's quite far from West Virginia. But there are similarities, I think, in the ways in which West Virginia and maybe Appalachia more generally, and the border region more generally, and Juarez and El Paso kind of more specifically, have been like used for their resources. There's a ton of extraction, both in terms of like actual like mineral extraction in both Appalachia and that region there, but also extraction in terms of like physical labor and you know, post NAFTA, all of these factories that had been in the United States and been paying something maybe somewhere near a living wage, moved across the border and started paying very, very, very low wages. And so there were these similarities that I started to see there. And there was also the similarity of like Appalachia and West Virginia and the border region and Juarez there as places that are difficult to love, but for the people who really, really do love them, like that love is so deep and so strong. And I think that I kind of thought growing up in West Virginia that everybody like loved the place that they'd grown up in this like bone deep way, which a lot of people do. But as an adult, I started to realize like, oh, some people don't have this sort of attachment, but the people who love Juarez love it in the same way, I think, that those of us from West Virginia do. So there were suddenly all of these similarities that came forward for me as I was living there. And I was fascinated by them. And I really feel like Juarez and northern Chihuahua there and southern Texas is like the only other place that I've loved as much as West Virginia. And I spent about 9 months there. And I'm clearly am not from there. I'm from West Virginia, but the intensity of the place and the way that people love it. So I knew I wanted to write about it. And I thought at first I would write about it in a kind of non-fictional way. I thought I would write about my experience of going out there when I was 21, but it just didn't work. It wasn't coming across on the page the way that I wanted it to. So I set it aside and started to work on Sugar Run, and I wrote Sugar Run. And then it was after that I came back and started to think about it in terms of a more fictional universe. What would happen if I thought about this as a novel? And so using the very real place, but letting some of you know, each of these characters, Mateo, Alex, and Alana, each of them get a little bit of my own experiences there and a lot of kind of their own like fictional experiences. And that's just the way it worked for me. It wasn't working as nonfiction. So yeah.
That's so interesting now, having read the book twice, knowing the like kind of nonfiction element to it, because I mean, that's so tricky, right? As a writer, you know, that whole stupid saying, which maybe sometimes isn't stupid, like write what you know.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, like hearing you kind of talk about it sort of from a personal stance, because obviously, by the way, this is for anyone who hasn't read it yet, it kind of reads almost like a crime novel noir, like, I mean, there's like a missing person, right? I mean, it's a very like plot driven kind of like you're reading the book like, oh my God, what's going to happen on top of everything else.
Right. Even in that little paragraph I read in the beginning, and I did this, kind of on purpose, but it's very lightly alluded to, but like their car is abandoned, like something happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Like immediately it's like, oh, something is afoot. Like you're kind of, it's that feeling.
Right.
And, I wonder too with that, like, did you, like, again, you came from this kind of personal experience you had there. And I love what you're saying, how of course each character, which I think is so true of fiction. Like when I write any fiction, I'm every character. I'm not one character, literally all of them. It's my weird brain. So, but I wonder about like this sort of the plot and this, like the intensity that we have going. I mean, is that something that when you sat down, it kind of became a plot driven novel when you said it was going to be fiction for yourself? Or is that something that came later?
It came later. So plot always comes later for me. And I think it's interesting because I actually do, I mean, at least with Sugar Run and Perpetual West, they're like plot driven in a certain way, right? Like that is almost sort of unexpected for me too, because when I begin any fiction project, it always begins with image and then moves to character and then moves to plot or the structure of it later. So image and place are very tied. So it's always like, I think with Sugar Run, it was like images of when Jody gets out of prison in the mountains, she sees the mountains, but also images of her and Paula in a motel room. And with this one, it was an image of a car arriving at the border and two young people in it. And it took me a while to sort of get to know the people in the car. Like I could see it, I could have the image of it, but then I really had to slowly get to know the characters and figure that out. And it wasn't until I had done a whole draft like that I really started to figure out what would happen to these characters. So the sense of something something will happen to them crept in early on. Like I had this sense for the characters that there was something afoot, as you had said, something bigger than them. But it was just through pretty much the whole first draft. It was just a sense. It was just a sense of something. And it took me a long time to figure out what that was. So for better or for worse, that just seems to be the way that I work with fiction, is that plot comes later. And in the beginning, I'm really just concerned with getting the characters right. And then and plot is the thing that changes the most for me too. Upon recommendations from readers that I trust, from my agent, from my editor, I'll change whole things in the plot, but the characters really stay the same.
I mean, that makes sense so much with your writing, like the sense of, like you're saying, I love this idea of just like images. Mine are usually questions, but often like they're kind of formulated the same way of like something really abstract, and then you're kind of going this way. It's crazy with the plot conversation in terms of just craft and going about it that way, because when you first read this book, it's loaded with all sorts of things, right? Like identity, desire, all of these things. Like there's a million things we can keep talking about, which we will. But I just think it's interesting that the plot is something, like, I think the plot is so great in this, and you've done such a good job. And it's crazy to me that you're saying like, yeah, I just kind of went, I mean, I know it's not this easy, but sort of like went back and just put it all together. My writing could never. That's like the craziest thing ever.
I think there's probably got to be a better, much more streamlined process, but that's not the way it's worked. I was looking the other day in up in West Virginia, where I usually spend most of my time writing, in the cabin where I'm there. I have like 6 printed out drafts, like full on, of Perpetual West, and looking at it and just being like, wow, like, I think that it would probably make sense to figure out a structure earlier on, but
but sure,
that's not the way that my brain goes. So I
actually, one of the things this week, I was excited we were going to do this talk. So I was reading, or maybe it was on a podcast, I don't remember, but you said that you write in like a cabin in the woods with no electricity, which, as someone who's like from Los Angeles, like I live in an apartment on the like helicopter route of the LAPD. So I'm like thinking in my head, like, what does this look like literally? So you like literally mean there's like a little cabin and you go sit and like, wow.
Yeah, so there's a little cabin that my dad, who I think that my parents are on this Zoom, my dad and I built when I was about I think I was 13 or 14, and that my sister and I had always shared a room, and I wanted my own room. And he, rather than build another room on the house, he'd always wanted to build a log cabin. And so we worked together. His like contract, which he literally wrote up as a contract for me, was that he wouldn't build it for me. We would build it together. And if I stopped working on it, then he would stop too. So after school for years, we worked on it, and it was finished shortly before I left home. But now I'm back, and I use it as my writing cabin. So it's got a little wood stove, and I have like battery rechargeable or battery operated lamps. And I just have to make sure my computer is charged up. I do a lot of early drafts are written longhand anyway, so I don't really need the computer for that. But yeah, it's like, and my cell phone doesn't work out there, and so it's very cut off, which I've grown kind of attached to for my process. So yeah.
That's totally fascinating. It's like your own Walden Pond out there.
Yeah.
I guess too, that's interesting that you're saying, like, I guess people ask me this too, and I never know the answer, but I think you kind of almost answered it. Like, I think it is important when you're making art, for me at least, it's just like thinking. And I can only like think. I mean, obviously we're thinking as we're walking around and living and all those things, but like the quiet, like the actual being able to like close the door, and even if, it's not really always about like the labor of getting the sentences out, is labor at some point, but like just like the quiet stillness of like being able to just think is like a really kind of magical, I don't know. I think that's pretty cool. You have a little cabin. I need to get one of those here.
Yeah. You can come visit in West Virginia. We have multiple buildings. But yeah, I think so. I do think that like the, especially I've found it particularly during the pandemic, like we're so, the divisions between like work and home life, I was teaching for a long time on Zoom, and it can be hard to figure out like, when do I like the physical separation in that I can't check my email while I'm out there. I can't, like, if if my partner needs me for something, then he can come get me, but he has to like come out and get me. And I do think that it's very nice to have that, because it shuts something off in my brain that otherwise is, I don't know, distracted very easily.
Yeah, it's like solitude, right? Like it's just basic quietness and stillness. I love that. I want to see a picture of this cabin.
Oh yeah, I know. I was just wondering. I don't think I have on my desktop anywhere any pictures, or I could screen share, but yes.
This is someone from LA, like totally fascinated with this idea. So yes, I have like a garage. I could maybe do something there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've different times in my life, I feel like there's been, when my partner and I lived in Iowa City, I would go right in it was a basement there for me, because it was this big old Victorian house, and I just really needed the space, the like physical separation, like I'm leaving now. And I also wrote in the public library there. I don't know if public libraries around you, but there in Iowa City, you could actually use your library card and rent a room, and it was yours for the day. And it was very, very sparse, you just had a desk, but I liked that.
Yeah.
And that didn't give you, I mean, I was still connected to the internet and stuff there, but it was a separate space, and it was like very useful to be like, the only thing that I do here is as I work on fiction. I guess that's the thing I like, is having a physical space that's like, this is it. Like my task while I'm here is to work on fiction. Other parts of my life happen in other spaces.
It is really cliche, but I totally agree. I think there has to be like, whatever the size or space or whatever it is, it just has to be yours, so that your brain can just like spill out onto it and, see what happens. I'm curious then too about, speaking of libraries, I'm curious about all the research you did or didn't do for this, because so there's the story of a lucha libre who's a Mexican wrestler, Mateo, and this beautiful love story, and I won't give anything away because I do want everyone to buy this book. But like, you seem to know everything about like Mexican wrestling, and so in my mind I'm like, well, now I know that you kind of live down there, but now I need to know more. Like, how much research did you do? Where did this come from? Like, please tell me you're a wrestler. I don't know. Like, I need to know.
Well, So I did do a lot of research, and some of it I was doing before I even knew that I was doing it. Like some of it was just like lived experience. So when I took the Greyhound out to El Paso, when I got off, the woman who I'd gone out there to meet up with picked me up at the bus station, and she wanted to take me immediately to meet this new friend that she had made, who is this like young punk activist and musician, but also he was training to become a wrestler. And long story short, she ended up leaving me for him. I mean, our relationship as it was ended, and she was with him for a while, and I was very, very heartbroken. But fast forward many years, it was quite helpful. So when I started actually seriously working on this novel, I was not in the cabin in West Virginia. I was like, one weekend I was down in North Carolina working on it. Anyways, you know those moments, which is funny because this ties back to the conversation we were just having. But when you're supposed to be working on fiction and you're like, it's not going very well, so I went over to Facebook and was like, let me go look up that wrestler, and I found him, the real wrestler from back in 2005 when I met him. And he had continued training, and he's a fairly famous wrestler in Mexico now. And he answered my Facebook friend request and my message, and he remembered me. And I set up, I got a small grant and went out. He's from Juarez, but he also lives in Mexico City half the time. So I went out and met up with him and followed him around. He was very generous with his time, answering all kinds of questions, taking me to different wrestling events in Juarez. And then I also spent almost 2 months in Mexico City, shadowing him, basically going to the gyms when he was training, when he was preparing for his fights, and he was just very, very generous with that. And so that was my kind of primary source for my research. I also read, there's a woman named Heather Levi who I think she's at Temple University, and she did an ethnography on lucha libre, on Mexican professional wrestling. Her book was very, very useful to me. And I did take some wrestling classes. So I am not good at wrestling, actually. I'm terrible at it. But it was a point when actually I'd gotten back from Mexico City, and I'd done a lot of asking questions, watching wrestling events, all that kind of thing. But I realized that to write the character of Mateo, as you said, who is a wrestler, I needed to know some of the physical components. Like I didn't know what it felt like to stand in the ring. What did the ropes feel like? So I contacted a wrestling school in Greensboro, North Carolina, and this guy, Lebron Cozon, who runs the school, I told him why I wanted to come, and, said, hey, is this okay with you? And he was super supportive. And so I went there like once a week for a couple months, and turns out I'm very bad at it. I couldn't even do like the most basic. I mean, the most basic beginning is it's all about control. It's all about control. So it's controlled falling, like, because it's as much performance art as it is an athletic event. You need to be doing these giant athletic maneuvers, but with so much control that you don't hurt yourself or hurt the other person. It's as if you're hurting them, but you're not actually trying to like massively injure anyone. So it's about control. And so in the beginning, it was just learning how to control my body while it was falling, and I was not very good at it. And so Cozon told me that I was going to give myself a concussion and I would not be able to write my novel. So that was probably true. So I kept going, but I just did, again, more watching, but there I was invited to get up, if I had a question, get up in the ring, feel the ropes, to really ask details about when I had been in Mexico City, I was much, much more just, respectfully just watching, but not trying to like put myself into the ring. So, so it was fun. It was good. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so, I love books like this where, I mean, I assumed you weren't a lucha libre. So I'm like, okay, sure, right. You knew it well enough. So it's always so interesting, I think, with any kind of art, what kind of like research we emotionally do, but then there's like the physical aspect of things where like, if you're writing something, you have to have a physical understanding of that thing, or it's like really hard to write it, it's like, yeah, I think that's really cool. What an amazing story. So he didn't end up with that woman then, I guess, when you were.
No, that yeah, ended, but they're still friends, and I'm actually about to go down to Mexico City and meet up. I'm still friends with both of them, more so with Aaliyah, but they're still in touch, and so I'm gonna go back and see him, bring him a copy of the book. It hasn't been translated into Spanish, but still, I'm just gonna give him a copy. And yeah,
amazing. I love Mexico City, like so. It's interesting too, like one of the things I thought, just as a Californian, and just sort of like the border, I mean, beyond crisis, is the border in El Paso is so different than the border in California. I went to college in San Diego, where, a long time ago when I was in college, which they don't do this anymore. They used to, like, seriously, there were party buses from campus, like charter buses, like, take you over the border. I mean, that's been long gone, but like, I don't know, it's really interesting reading sort of, again, like the different sort of perspective and place, like the border's so big. Yeah. I want to talk about this word desire, because when I first read it, I kept writing that down. And then when I was revisiting this, I kept writing it down. And I think you've done such an amazing job of what it means for people to want things, and like the pangs of wanting things and wanting to know really who you are. And like, I thought it was so interesting. I mean, these people are young, Alex and Alana, and they're married, they're really young, they're in school, but already, like, we see them in the beginning, they have such different like point of views about even like academia and like what it means to go to school. And they come from sort of this rural working class place. And one person, you know, just like these identity crises and this desire to be maybe something you are and something you're not. And I want to know too, if that came from the beginning as an image, like, I know this is what I'm writing about, or is that something as you got to draft through, you're like, oh, here it is. Like, how did that work?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much. That's a huge compliment to me, because when I first started working on the book and all the way through, one thing I kept thinking that, like, if I didn't do anything else very well, I really wanted to try to capture the mixture of the yearning that is like being 21 years old, that is often, it takes the form of sort of yearning after someone else, like romantic love, sure, but it's so much bigger than that, because it is, I think, as you were saying, at the core of itself, it's like a yearning to know yourself. And I think that some of that came because I was the same age that Alana and Alex are when I moved down there to El Paso and Juarez, and that was such a defining aspect of my time there. It was like both like heartbreak, but also like huge political awakening, like realizing so many things about the US relationship to Mexico, and the just all of the politics there. And I hung out a lot with folks who I represent kind of in the book, in the Casa de Cultura. There's this kind of group of counterculture activists who have this community center of sorts there. And so I really wanted to like bottle up that sense of yearning and make it come through on the page. So the fact that you kept writing down the word desire, I think, tells me that I did manage that to a certain extent, and I'm very, very pleased. So I guess I would say that, to answer your question, it was there from the beginning. I think it was there from my own experience, and then it manifested itself kind of in the characters. And I think I was very, very interested in trying to portray that raw feeling of being young and wanting to know more, wanting to feel more, wanting like to know yourself, to know other people, to know another country, like just this like raw sort of yearning that manifests in so many different ways. And I kind of just wanted to see like what happens if I have these characters who are all experiencing this to greater or lesser extents, and put them on the page and then see where that goes.
You're saying something too that even adds more to this for me, is I guess I thought of their age, but I kept relating to them, and I almost think it is such a like unfortunate and great universal thing that we all have to do, which is like come of age. And at that particular age, you're so tender. And these, that was another word I was thinking too, is like all of these people in this book, which is again a reason always to read a Mesha Maren book. They're so tender, you know, and they're just even in that tragedy kind of stuff we were sort of speaking of, you know, there's still like this tenderness and empathy. And again, it's like the funniest way to write a crime novel, really, which I hate to keep calling it a crime novel, but like, because it, you know, it's like, it's just, there's so much more to it in terms of just like how we feel as people. And it's true that like, you know, falling in love at any age, but especially that age, is just like so rough. Like they're really going through it in this, you know, and they're married. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's explained in the book sort of why they're married, and it makes sense why they got married so young. But were they always married to you? This was a couple that was married, or that came.
Right. They were not always. I did not. And it is a bit unusual, right? Because they're quite young and they got married as undergraduate students. And so I don't think that this gives too much away because it's laid out pretty early on in the book. But Alex comes from a very conservative religious background. And for him to be comfortable having a romantic relationship with Alana, he needed to be married to her. And she was like, okay with that. And I think that later, you know, as she's working out aspects of herself, she does kind of ask herself, like, wait a minute, how much did I really think about these sort of major decisions? But yeah, it was not until I'd worked with the characters for a while that I realized that they were married. And I think that some of that came about when I realized just how conservative of a background Alex came from, and just that he would not have been comfortable. It's not until he, you know, through the novel, through Perpetual West, he begins to work his way towards being more comfortable with certain aspects of himself. And part of that is the fact that he's queer, and he has not admitted that to himself. And so in a way, I think he both married, you know, asked Alana to marry him because he was in love with her and wanted to be with her and wasn't comfortable with that if he wasn't married. But also he used it as a sort of shield, as if I marry this woman I'm in love with, then I won't ever have to think about these queer desires that I have again, which of course it's not true. The desires are still there, but he had hoped, I think, that they would go away if he married a woman. Yeah. And
also for Alana too, I mean, she wasn't sure where she wanted to be. And this was also a way to like at that age, you know, where you know, you do more reckless things, I would say.
Right.
They did. But like, yes, move to follow him to do this thing. I mean, in so much of this book too, like Alex is kind of like the leader in a way of like, here's what we're going to do. This is what I want to do. And he's introducing her to like this, you know, kind of radical art scene and all these things. And she's kind of on the periphery, but I think it's interesting, like the commentary of like her, I can't remember if she's enrolled at the university or the community college, but it's just kind of like to me, as someone who grew up like first generation going to college, I went to community college, nobody in my family went to college. Like that to me was so normal. Like you work at a restaurant and then you just like sign up for a class or two. And that was like, that's just the way you go to college. That was it. And you don't see that in a lot of books, which is hard. There's not, you know, a lot of books don't really deal with class at all. And this is dealing with so many things, but there is this like element of their class and him sort of wanting to be something else and her almost thinking she wants to be something else. And there's just this sort of acceptance. And I really loved that. I thought that was great. And I think I wrote it down on one of these pages. Oh yeah. Somewhere in one of the descriptions, Alana is disillusioned by academia. It was one of the descriptions of the book. And I thought that was so interesting, especially since you are a professor. I don't know, do you want to speak about that a bit and Alana's experience in university? Yeah, so I think that, you know, so many things that I feel like end up coming up in my fiction, I can't quite answer. Like, obviously it all comes from my brain. So it comes from somewhere, right? But I don't have a memory of like being like, oh, I know I'm going to make, you know, Alex from this background, Alana from, like, it just sort of comes up and then I work with it. But I was definitely aware, I think from the very beginning, of the fact that Alex, I guess that they have complicated backgrounds that are sometimes complementary and sometimes not. So Alex was born in northern Mexico, adopted by a white Pentecostal couple who were there as missionaries,
they brought him back to West Virginia and raised him very working class in West Virginia. And he got a scholarship to go to a fictional college that I made up called Hall College in Virginia, which is where Alana's father teaches. And he teaches history there. And so Alana comes from not an extremely privileged background, but her dad is a university professor, and her father went to Princeton. Like she has this access in these certain ways, and it was always expected that she would, go to college, and that she, these certain expectations. And so for Alex, he's definitely the first person in his family to go to college, and it's a big deal that he's there. And they meet through Alana's father. And then Alex finished college early, and he's ready to go on to graduate school, and Alana is still in undergrad. And Alex had also finished high school early. So even though they're a very similar age, he's a little bit further along in his trajectory of schooling. So I knew that I wanted them to kind of wrangle with these ideas about what school can do for you. So in the beginning, yes, she's pretty sure she's dropping out of school. She's enrolled at the University of Texas when they moved out there. She was an English major back in Virginia, and she's transferred over, but she's pretty disillusioned with it. And she is, at this point in her life, when you meet her in the book, she's fine with just waitressing. She doesn't love it. It's not like that's her calling in life, but she's fine with that. And she's trying to figure out what she does want to do with her life. And so she doesn't think that school that it is necessarily what she wants to do, but she both has a father who is a university professor and a husband, Alex, who colleges represent something very different for him. It's this brand new opportunity. He has, up to this point at least, really loved being in academia, and has opened so many doors for him. And so for her to just come out and say like, oh, I'm going to drop out of college, is complicated, like both for her relationship with her father and with her husband. So I think I had fun playing around with those different dynamics, that nothing is quite quite as black and white. And while you meet Alana in a very working class job, she's waitressing, that's not actually her background. And you meet Alex having these intellectual conversations, but it's taken a lot for him to get to that point. And there was one moment when I was imagining the characters, and before they moved out to Texas, they lived in Virginia, and they shared a room, and they have bookshelves on both sides of the room. And to me, when I started imagining that, I could really see them. Like Alana's bookshelves are stuffed and overflowing, and she's like reading Keats, and she's reading Plath, and she's reading like, all this poetry, this literature. And up until the time that he went to college, the only things Alex was really allowed to have around the house were different versions of the Bible and Westerns. And his bookshelf is slowly growing, but he has a lot to catch up to. So I think that kind of encapsulates like their dynamics in a way.
Yeah, I really love that so much, because you're right, they need each other in so many ways, but then they're so different in so many ways. And again, I think that goes back to that desire of like, who do you really want to be versus who you are, where do you come from, all of those things. Also, if anyone has questions, you can keep sending them in. We'll answer them in a few here. One of the main questions I have for you, and this is, I think, purely selfish, because I am trying to write another novel, and I'm curious about sort of how long it takes you to write a novel, and what is your process? Are you a person that's writing every day 1,000 words, or how do you do this?
Right. Yeah. So I think the answer is, and as I'm sure you know, is it takes a while. I'm not good on word counts. I'm not good necessarily on working every single day. I started this book in 2000, like seriously started it in 2015. But for me, usually it's like a year or so of kind of like note taking. Like I'll just longhand write in notebooks, and I'm getting to know the characters, and it's not looking anything like a draft of a book yet. And then 2000, right around when Sugar Run came out. So that would be early 2019 is when I first turned a draft of this into my agent. And he's very, very good at reading and giving feedback. So we went through a couple different drafts together before I gave a copy of it to Kathy Porries at Algonquin. So I guess I would date it to like late 2015 is when I would say that I started this project. And when I am in the midst of seriously drafting, I don't do word count or page count, but I do like time count. So I'll say I need to spend at least 4 hours. So I'll do like 4 hours, 4 days a week, something like that, right? 4 or 5 days. And the 4 hours is usually kind of like a minimum because I'm pretty slow at getting into it. I have a cup of coffee. I usually read something that's not my own writing, but someone else's, read for a while, move over to longhand notes in a notebook. And then if I'm at the point where I'm working on a computer, then maybe an hour and a half into my time, I move onto the computer and start to pick up where I left off the day before. So it's like sometimes painstakingly slow. So if I tell myself like 4 or 5 hours, and whatever, that could be a paragraph done in that time. It could be a sentence, could be several pages. But I think that I realized through like years of trying different ways that time is really the only demarcation that works for me.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting. I started this year setting timers, like just to see,
Mhm.
I've never tracked my time. Like I always was, I'm not a word count person either, and I don't write every day. But then I was like, how much time am I really spending? So It's funny, the 3 to 4 hour mark is where my brain shuts off. I can't do anything past 4 hours, or it's just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. It's like garbled, scrambled.
Exactly. No, that makes sense to me. And I think sometimes I say 4 hours as a minimum because it'll often take me about an hour to get into it. And so I think that 3 hours of actually being face to face with a project, that's pretty good. That's a serious chunk of time. And so, but every book is different. I drafted something during the like beginning of the pandemic that the draft came out way faster than anything, and it needs a lot of work. And I'm working on that now, but it was unlike, I would say my process with Sugar Run and Perpetual West were pretty similar. I think it was I had a little more confidence with Perpetual West because I had written a novel before, but there was a pretty similar process. And then with this new one, I mean, I don't know if it was, I wasn't going out. I wasn't doing other things during the very early days of the pandemic. And I think I also funneled a lot of my fear and anxiety into like when I was in my cabin writing, I didn't have to think about other things. So I would just go out there and it was, but that the very rough early draft of this new novel came out super quickly. And in a way, I didn't trust it. Like I thought like, when I like showed it to my agent, I was like, please tell me this might be like complete garbage because it came really fast. And he was like, no, it needs some work, but it's not, it doesn't. And that just sort of proved to me too, that my process is going to be different for every book.
Yeah. It's kind of daunting, I feel like, because I'm not even sure what my process was for the first book. It was the first one. So then this second time around, I'm on like, almost like, I hope what I think is the final draft. And so the beginning was all weird, but now sort of the tedious labor parts and all that are exactly the same. I'm going through, it's almost the same, but certain parts were different. So yeah, it's interesting. I think some parts change and then some parts remain, but that's pretty cool. I think that's the dream though, right? Like the person who just like blurts out a manuscript and like,
I was always so jealous of people and I never had anything near that happen. And this was like over 3 months, but still it was a draft in 3 months and it's a shorter novel, but still I was like, whoa, like what just happened? So it probably may never happen again. And that's okay too, but.
Your pandemic art, I love it.
Yeah.
Patricia, do you want to jump in if there's any questions? If not, I have some stupid fun questions.
Well, I would love to have a mixture of both of those. I mean, how could we go without some stupid fun questions too? This is a question about revisions. What's your revision experience like? And that may include like beta readers or anybody that gives you feedback. What's that experience for you, Mesha?
Yeah, so I do have 2 very trusted readers. One, my partner Matthew Randall Owain is also a writer and a very, very trusted reader for me. And so he's always the first reader for me. And then I have two other writers who I've known for years and years, who I often share early manuscripts with. And then my agent is I feel very lucky to have an agent who is very interested in giving me feedback. And so with Sugar Run and with Perpetual West, we went through 3 or 4 drafts before turning it over to an editor, and then years of editing with the editor. So it's years and years. I mean, I think that it was from early 2019 until, I think we stopped being able to do any edits on Perpetual West about 9 months ago, like 9 months before it came out. So years of editing.
Crissy, what about you? Is a revision experience something you'd even want to talk about?
I mean, no, I'm just kidding. I'm actually, I'm in a unique situation, which I don't think will happen again, but my debut novel, Creatures, I cold called agents, and I had only had, I think, one person read it, and I didn't let anyone see it. And I think I spent like 3 years on it, completely alone on like an island. It's also about an island.
Mm-hmm.
And then my agent got it, and we made, I think, only tiny tweaks, and then I sold it. And the book as it is now, we didn't have a ton of revisions. I don't think I will ever get that lucky again. And the book I'm working on now is a hot mess. So I have a feeling I'm in a longer sort of process. So I kind of think what happened to me was just like maybe a bit lucky, but I had a really short and great editing process. So I can only imagine it's going to be terrible from here on out, but hopefully not.
Wow.
It doesn't have to be terrible. Being long doesn't have to be terrible though. Yeah, I don't know. I like, maybe because it's so long for me, but I like just buckle in for the ride, like, yeah.
When you're thinking about authors or even not authors, other artists, who inspires you, Mesha? Where do you go for kind of getting you in the mindset or taking you out? Sometimes you have to kind of get out of your own head.
Well, it's different for every project. So I as I was talking with Crissy about, I think my process or my daily writing practice involves a sort of transitioning into the writing, and it usually takes me a while. And part of that is reading for me. And I don't read things that are new to me during my writing process. I mean, I'll read, another part of the day, I'll read a new novel. But when I'm in those 4 or 5 hours, I try to read something that I'm familiar with so that I'm reading it for the language, not for the plot or character. And it can be all kinds of different things, but usually throughout the process, I'll find something that I think of as kind of my compass. So for Sugar Run, the book was Dennis Johnson's Angels. That was my compass, and I kept a copy of it there, and I would flip it open to, if I felt like I wasn't sure what it was that I was trying to do with my own writing, I would flip it open to any random page. And it really felt like a compass, like it just reoriented me, like, oh, okay, like I'm not like I'm trying to write like him, but like this is, there's some resonance that I'm trying to hit. And for Perpetual West, it was a few different things, but I think that Roberto Bolaño's novels, and particularly his novel Amulet, was often that compass for me.
Wow. Thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing kind of what shapes your thinking when you're in the middle of it too. That's very challenging. Crissy, you may, again, I can give you a pass if you're just like, don't ask me. I'm not saying.
Actually, when I'm writing, which I am now, I can't read all the new novels. I can't turn my brain off, so I have to, unfortunately, like sometimes miss out for a whole year or something. So what I read is poetry, all the poetry, anything I can get my hands on, online, at the library. I mean, I read the old stuff, the new stuff, but my favorite poet that I found during this last section of writing is Victoria Chang. She is so amazing, and she's always writing about like sad things, which I love, but the joy and tragedy all at once, like we've been talking about. But yeah, poetry, because I can't write poetry. I'm terrible at it, and I love it. So it takes my brain somewhere else. Always poetry for me.
We have an audience question from Jerome, and the love for place is obvious in Sugar Run, but there's also constantly a feeling of being trapped. Anything like this in Perpetual West?
Yes, I think so. So I think, like I was talking in the very beginning about when I actually myself went down to El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought I'd come so far from where I grew up, but here are all these similarities. I think that there is that feeling for the characters in Perpetual West somewhat too, and it's extra because we're talking about an international border there. So there are conversations that I put into the book explicitly for bringing in these elements of the fact that I guess I really wanted the reader to sit with the fact that when you have two cities like El Paso and Ciudad Juarez that are physically so close to one another, but there's an international border there, the experience for someone, an American going south, is going to be very, very different than for someone from Mexico coming north, right? And so there's this moment in the book that I'm thinking of right now where there's she's a Mexican national. She's from Mexico City, and she's a visual artist, and she is invited to El Paso to have an art opening. She has some of her art on display, and she comes and she gives a talk. And someone who she knows from art school, she meets up with him in Ciudad Juarez afterwards, and he's talking to her about how, he wishes he could have come, but he couldn't get the paperwork in line. He wasn't allowed to come over. That the last time that he tried to come to the United States, his passport had been confiscated. And it's particularly hard for him as a dark brown-skinned man to come to the United States. And he's asking her about her choice to show her artwork in the United States, even though it's so close, it's right there, but he can't come. And they have this conversation. And so I think that those elements of like loving a place but being trapped are there in a different way, but I think there are some parallels there too. Yeah.
And you can take a pass on this if you want to, but inquiring minds want to know. When you're thinking about amorous relationships and writing about them, I'll never forget Diane Gabaldon. We wrote a whole like little book, little treatise on sex scenes, how to write them. Right? Yeah. And so frontiers and boundaries, interracial, sex, romantic, amorous, erotic. What's your hot take on writing about that? And do you just like to stay away from it? Do you struggle with it, or do you just go right ahead?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, I think not to be too, frank about it, but like when I write deeply about characters, and sex is a part of a character, like it's a part of life, it's part of the character, right? So I don't think, particularly because I am writing about desire, as Crissy said, I don't think it would be right for me to just simply not engage with that aspect of my characters whatsoever at all. But I do think it's very challenging. I think it's very, very challenging in general, but I find it particularly challenging myself. So the compass that I used for that aspect of the writing is a book called A Sport and a Pastime by James Salter. And it's, in my opinion, a very, very beautiful book, very beautifully written, but there's a lot of sex in it. And in my opinion, it's written very well. And in that book, it's a heterosexual couple, but to me that was neither here nor there, even though I was writing about a queer couple in Perpetual West. It was the way in which Salter approached writing about it. And they're also in A Sport and a Pastime. The characters are about the same age as the characters in Perpetual West. They're in their early 20s, and there's this level of intensity to their relationship that was something I wanted to capture. So that's really what I do, is I just try to find a model for myself. And while on the surface, so many things are different about the characters who are having romantic relationships in my book, deep underneath the core of what I was going at, I saw in Salter. And so I would keep his book there too. And I would just flip it open and be like, how did he handle this? And draw from that.
Crissy? I turn it over to you.
Yeah, I don't think there's a ton of sex in my book. I think, well, in my book, there's a marriage that's sort of falling apart. So there's sort of like lack of sex and more talk of that. But yeah, I'm not afraid to go after it. I think, like Mesha said, it's just a part of life. And when you're talking about people, it'd be really weird to like remove a whole piece of life from them.
As, Crissy, are there any questions that you brought that you want to get to us tonight?
Yes, well, we have 1 minute left. So, Mesha, are you ready for the lightning round?
Okay.
Do you like phone calls or texts?
Text.
Dolphins or horses?
Horses.
What is your favorite childhood TV show?
Ooh, well, so I don't have a favorite childhood TV show. We did not have a TV. I would sneak and go watch, well, not sneak, I was allowed, but I would go watch things at the neighbors' houses. And this is sort of the opposite. We'll just close it up with this. It's the opposite of favorite, but my most memorable was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it was the opposite of favorite because I was terrified of it. Okay, well, it's good to hear someone else. Most people laugh when I say that because it's actually, I've seen it as an adult. It's really not that scary, but I've come to realize that when you grow up without any television, just television itself is a little scary or like overwhelming. And then when they're like vampires eating kittens, there is one scene somewhere where that happens, I think. And it's stuck in my memory like very strongly. So yeah.
Well, I think that's hilarious about Buffy because I've always been kind of weirdly scared of it too. We must be the same age.
Good. Yes.
Well, we're going to end on that note. Let's take it
right.
out with some drama and excitement. I love that. I want to thank you so much, Crissy, for drawing out this wonderful conversation with our guest tonight, Mesha Maren. Mesha, congratulations on Perpetual West. We're so delighted to have you this evening, and we appreciate this wonderful conversation. And we look forward to whatever's next after you get out of that cabin, right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.